As a chemist, I've been documenting my experiment in the workbook. I have drawn out my reaction scheme. I have documented all of my various materials and the ratios that they're to be used in. I've documented my procedure. And once I've generated a product, I have created 2 samples from my experiment, and I want to get them analyzed to confirm that they are the correct structure. So I go to my task plan section, and this is my portal out to the world of requests and analyses. It allows me to manage my samples, allocate tasks, and to view results for those samples. My 2 samples are here in the task plan, and I want to assign an analysis to sample 1. So I browse the list of available activities that have been published within the system. I pick the activity that I want to apply to this sample, in this case an LCMS, and a new task has been created on that sample. Switching to the tasks view, I can see that a task has been created and assigned to my sample 1. I now want to request this analysis of the analytical department. That request has now been sent to the analytical department, and I can now continue with the rest of my work while awaiting my results. As an analyst, I have logged into my OneLab homepage so that I can see an overview of what is happening in my world. I can see various task plans that I'm working on. I can see if I have received any messages from colleagues. Have I had any tasks assigned to me? Are there any tasks that have been requested of my analytical department? I see that some have been requested, so I want to have a closer look at these. Amongst the tasks that are listed, I can see a request for LCMS that has just come in from Seth, the chemist. I select this task, and if I had the right permissions, I could assign this particular task to colleagues within my department. But in my role in the labs, I am only allowed to assign tasks to myself, which I shall go ahead and do. That task has now been taken out of the list of available tasks, and this task has been moved into the list of tasks assigned to me, and I am ready to go ahead and execute this task. So still as Lee the analyst, I have logged into my workbook, and I have started a new mass spec experiment because I know that there are some mass spec requests coming in. And I'm using an experiment that is based on a template that has given me a set of defined sections that I need to fill in order to record my full experiment. So I work my way through each section. I see that the template has provided me with an operating manual for my equipment. I want to record the specific equipment that I used in this experiment, and I do this by recording the barcode for each piece of equipment. When I enter the barcode, this triggers a lookup into the equipment management module and brings back the relevant information about this piece of equipment. I see that having identified the balance and the pH meter that I intend to use, the system is warning me that these 2 pieces of equipment need calibration. So I know that I have to go ahead and calibrate these before use. I have documented my mass spec parameters, and I want to record the materials that I use in this experiment. The template has already defined the materials I should be using, and I want to identify each specific container of these materials that I use in this experiment to give material traceability. So I scan the barcodes from the containers. This triggers a lookup into the inventory system and again brings back relevant information about my container of material. So I've recorded the setup of my experiment. Now I want to work with the samples and tasks that have been assigned to me. So I go to my own task plan section. I know that I've been allocated a task, so I go straight to the tasks and import from the list of tasks that have been assigned to me. There is the LCMS. I select and bring that into my experimental task plan. That task has now been imported, along with the sample itself that I need to analyze. That sample has also been pushed into my samples table of my experiment, which means that I can now start to use that in my various sample preparations and dilutions. I have already made up my buffer solution, and I want to incorporate my sample into my test solution. I can now go ahead, record how much I did weigh out, and continue to make up my solutions and dilutions until I am ready to actually analyze the sample preparation. At this point, I will go ahead and take my sample solution, run it on my equipment, let the equipment perform the analysis, and also produce an output file that contains all of my results. In order to get my results back, I perform what is called a data acquisition on this task. The output file from the equipment has been produced and sent to a specific file location. OneLab monitors that file location. When a new file arrives, it picks up the file, it interrogates the file, and passes out all of the required data and stores it safely within the OneLab measurement store, ready to be imported into task results. I will now go ahead and do that final import of task results. As soon as I have executed this particular task, the relevant file containing sample information for my sample has been detected, and those results automatically mapped to my sample. So all I need to do is accept these results, and these results are now recorded against this task, against this sample, within this task plan. So I now have the numerical results for my analysis. I also want to capture the file that these results came from. So I import the source file that those results came from. I now have the numerical results, but also the spectrum itself. And this is an important part of my analysis. And so I'm going to tag this particular results section with the sample ID. The reason for this will become clear later. Now that I've performed my analysis, I can go ahead and document my sample identification, confirm the structure, and again tag this particular results section with the sample ID. I can round off my experimental record by making conclusions, getting this experiment witnessed and approved, and then my work as an analyst on this sample is done. Back as Seth the chemist, I'm in my workbook homepage, and I can see that a series of messages have been coming in showing me the progress of the request that I made. I can see that that task is now complete, so I can reopen my chemistry experiment, go directly to my task plan, and I can see exactly the same results that Lee recorded. So far I can see the quantitative results, but what about the structure results? To do this, I go back to my original samples list, and I tell the system to go ahead and retrieve all reference data related to this sample. The system immediately takes me to Lee's experiment and highlights the two sections that Lee tagged with my sample ID. I will take these two sections and bring them into my own experiment as what are called reference sections. So I now have a view of the mass spec report along with the spectrum itself and the structure results that Lee documented. These are both views into Lee's work, and every time I create one of these reference sections, I create a link to that other experiment. Viewing my references, I can see that I took two different sections from Lee's experiment, and I am presented with hyperlinks back to Lee's experiment if I want to find even more information about how the structure was arrived at. So as a chemist, not only have I recorded my own work and the way that I generated my new compound, I also have a record of what the analyst did in order to arrive at the final structure. Now that my experiment is complete, I can make my conclusions, confirm the structure, and send this experiment for witnessing and approval. I can then use the knowledge gained from this experiment to influence my future experiments.